So we're at that moment which we all watched when we were kids in The Wizard of Oz, when
Yep.
the curtain is coming back and you see the small little fat fella in the corner as the wizard. And suddenly you realize that the world and how you thought the world worked is completely different and that you've been wrong.
Welcome to the Mark Outward Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. How are you doing today? Well, as the world goes crazy. What do I mean? It's always been crazy. Today I'm going to talk about Ireland because while the character, the military operative known as Elon Musk, who finds the time to tweet 24/7 whilst running multiple international space-faring companies, is bringing down the British government at last. It's quite horrific to hear, but it's time. The public need to become aware of the satanic paedophile rings right at the top of government, and I, for one, welcome that. Now, part of this journey means that the war that we've all been fighting is being fought on multiple fronts and has been our entire lives. That includes all media, all education, all food, all water, everything. And part of that is publishing books. I have been a big proponent of the fact that we need to be pushing back in the information war on every level, not just videos like this and podcasts like this, but also in newspapers like the Light newspaper in the UK, with videos, with music, with songs, which I've seen that amazing girl in Australia who whose manager and record company said they would drop her if she didn't stop talking about COVID and viruses in her song. She refused, and now her song's gone viral, which is amazing. Poetry, which is a smaller audience, but it's still important. Films, movies, so many great films have come out. And part of this battle has led me and Abby Wynne, who I wrote this book with, Weapons of Mass Protection, Practical Tools for Spiritual Warfare, to set up this company, well, this organization called 104 Publishing. Now, 104 Publishing was really just set up to give us a vehicle to publish that book. But I knew, and Abby knew, that there may be certain books that we'd want to publish that would need to be published because the publishing industry has been part of the MK Ultra, part of the mind control. Very few things get through the gatekeepers within those organizations and put onto the shelves in the airports unless it's actually supporting the narrative, the MK Ultra. And by the way, if you guys have never seen the film Conspiracy Theorist starring Mel Gibson, 1997, Julia Roberts and Patrick Stewart, go and watch it. If you haven't watched it for a number of years, go and rewatch it. I watched it again the other night, and I'd forgotten most of it. I remembered bits of it, but I was amazed at how strong it is in the disclosure of MK Ultra. That is the biggest weapon that's been used against us, apart from other things like food and money and things like that. MK Ultra is part of that. So there was a book that we have put, the first book that we published that we've not written is called Breaking the Silence on the Return of Totalitarianism by Eddie Hobbs. Eddie Hobbs is a TV journalist in Ireland, was well known for talking about the financial system. He's been calling out the government for a good 30 years or so. But then he, of course, as soon as he realized COVID was not what everybody thought it was, then he got blacklisted by the media that used to call him the champion of the people. I'm going to be joined by Eddie in a second to discuss this book because I think it's an important bridge towards the awakening of the Irish people, but also internationally to let people know what's been going on from an Irish perspective, because I think Ireland is going to be next in this war after Elon's finished with Britain. It's going to be Ireland next, I'm pretty sure. But I'm just waiting for Eddie to join me now. Because we're on Zoom, not the usual StreamYard, and his internet is a little bit slow. So just give us a second to get Eddie on the show. While we're waiting for Eddie, oh, Eddie's here now. Here he comes. Eddie Hobbs, about to enter the room. Drum roll. Come on, Eddie. You can do it. Here he comes. Eddie's here. How you doing, Eddie?
Good and yourself.
Well, we're recording already, and I'm doing very
Okay.
well. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
We're already in the middle
And
of
to all your
January.
viewers.
Huh? Sorry.
And to all your viewers, Mark.
Thank you, Eddie. I've just done an introduction to you for those that don't know you. I've just told them about your amazing book, which I have in my hand here. Um, it's the fall. I've just realized it's the middle of January already, and somebody said at the beginning of this year it's going to be like 10 years in one. I don't know what it's been like for you, but it already feels like mid-June.
Well, yeah. I actually found the start of the year tricky, difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Just stuff that just not very positive stuff I had to deal with, for all last week. Weather was anyway. It was just a strange time. So it only felt like normal this week. I don't know. That maybe it's just me.
No,
Maybe.
it's not just you.
Okay. Okay.
It's energetically, it's crazy because we're right at the climax, I think. But I've just been telling the viewers about the reason why I thought this was such an important book. But do you want to tell your story to them as if they don't know you and they've never heard of you?
Sure. Well, a lot of us, maybe even here, we exist in an echo chamber, our own. And I wanted to get into all of that, which I'll come to in a second. The objective of this book is to reach out to those that are nearly awake, the people in the middle, that smell a rat, but they haven't been following this kind of material at all. And I wanted to give them a pretty detailed account of why they've been duped, how they've been duped, who's been doing it to them, what is the objective, and what is the proof, and let them and give it to them as a kind of an intellectual exercise without being over complex, so that they because it's the only way of getting them around to get off the merry-go-round that they're on, which is on the core of the book there, which is manufactured ignorance. And that manufactured ignorance is at an extreme in Ireland, where Irish MSM, the mainstream media, is effectively the North Korea of Europe. We know that because we can see it all around us. And the irony is that the more intellectual people are, the academics, the medical scientists, the more prone they are to fall for it and to stay in it. And then when they're in it, to completely and utterly reject anything that sort of tests their peace of mind by showing that they've been duped, they're being completely wrong, they haven't been following the data, and they've been engaging in counter propaganda themselves with all these tropes about conspiracy theory and all of that kind of stuff. So that was the purpose of the book, and I really went at it with research. There's like so I'm not expecting too many people to try and contradict what's there. And I don't expect any immediate interviews by mainstream media. I'll go knocking on doors, Mark, but I don't think it'll happen. I'd be delighted if it would, because I can tell you there isn't a single journalist that I'm aware of, major journalists in any of the mainstream media news, that could last 5 minutes, whatever, about 5 seconds, against this kind of material, because it's the truth. And all you have to do is let it free, and it will defend itself, as Saint Augustine said about the truth is a lion. Just let it loose; it'll defend itself. You don't need to defend it. And really, that's the purpose of the book.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to be involved in it because I know that you're meticulous in that respect. Well, I'm a little bit more throwing paint on a wall. You're extremely specific about everything, and everything's sourced, and you can't argue with it. And you have got some great intellectuals like Professor Angus Dalgleish doing quotes. He's right in the front here. This book uncovers in stark reality the truth behind the COVID pandemic and the climate change scam. And that's a man who's head of oncology at a university in London. He's one of the world's leading experts on cancer, and I met him last year, and
Yeah.
he's right at the front of this book. Yet it still falls on deaf ears. Have you worked out why that is?
Well, I mean, I'm getting at it. I mean, in the book, I get into how modern media, social media, and the echo chamber effect, the algorithms and so on, actually create fields of opportunity for propaganda to really feed in on top, to flood the zone. But we all think we're reading the same stuff. We're not, and we're alienated and dislocated from one another. So there's millions of people out there that have had no engagement whatsoever with the very basics of this material, and they don't realize that they're in a state of like what's called in the book agnogenesis, in other words, manufactured ignorance. In other words, there are ignorance manufacturers. That's part of the propaganda toolkit that has been used. And what struck me in the investigation of all this as I went through it was coming to the conclusion, because it's the only logical conclusion, and it's supported now by so much other material, that all of this was not happenstance. It was pre-planned and it was implemented with military grade, highly skilled psychological operations, also known as propaganda, at 21st century levels. And we're not used to that because we've never experienced it before. We've read about propaganda in history, we've heard about it in other countries other than our own, and we've assumed that that in our intellectual independence and might, that somehow we weren't vulnerable to this. Well, we were, and I was one of them. I mean, that was I woke early, but I mean, I woke starkly. Cover that in the book as well. I mean, my journey is there as well, and everybody has to go through the same thing because ultimately this thing is coming crashing down on top of the propagandists. I mean, that's quite clear. That's coming next. We're in now. The mainstream media and the establishment are now in Operation Cover Up. They have no choice. They're not going to come out and put their hands in the air, because to accept what they took part in, whether knowingly or unknowingly, is it will be an extraordinary blot on their lives. I mean, that's why I think there needs to be a truth commission for a lot of them. But those people that actually did this way back on a pre-planned basis, all those people need to go to jail after prosecution and due process. There's no other place for them because they're
Mhm.
very, very dangerous people.
Well, they've all got blood on their hands, and you've got, Mark Zuckerberg on on the Joe Rogan show last week going, oh, well, we were forced to do it. Firstly, he's showing himself to be lily-livered because he could have said no if he had any, beliefs that were worth having. And secondly, he's got so much blood in his hands. I don't know how he's going to get away with that. And it's the same for all the politics. What I said before you came on is that you've seen obviously the character. I call him the character of Elon Musk because I don't believe that's the original one. But what he's done in the last 3 weeks in terms of showing up the true depravity of the British establishment is more than the rest of us have done in 100 years combined. And I said before you came on that I think Ireland's going to be next. What do you think?
Well, I think it's very possible. I mean, it's English speaking. He knows about it. He's been commenting on it already, and there'll be significant people over at the Trump inauguration that are on our side of the fence. Not that they're pro-Trump, because I actually like my own sort of. We haven't discussed this, but my own kind of feeling about Trump is that I think the bullet changed him. When he moved his head that time, he didn't move his head, in my opinion. That like that was avoided for a reason. And I think that his agenda, going after the deep state, going after the pharma captivity of the regulators, letting RF Kennedy loose on it, and then Musk going in and doing what he's doing, all of this is making so much sense. It's electrifying, and it's amazing the speed at which it's happening. And
Yeah.
now that it has its own momentum, I can't see how it can be switched off. It's just coming. And but there is a word of caution, and that's that at the end of the day, uh, Elon Musk is an oligarch, and that's not a bad term, by the way. It depends on the person.
Yeah.
And Trump is Trump. He's a property developer, come a billionaire, with all of the baggage that goes with that. But there's nothing wrong with having baggage if you learn from it and you've converted to this a counterattack on what I call 21st century totalitarianism in open sight. It has to be fought, because if you don't fight totalitarianism, it gains total control. It's
Yeah.
not like a tyrant or an authoritative leader. They're not interested. If you back off, they'll take it. They'll take everything off you. I mean, that's what totalitarianism is in its essence, as RN pointed out, and Matthias Desmet has pointed out, all the people I quote in the book, and many others. This is an extremely serious assault on our freedoms, on our lives, and it's now an open sight, and it's being revealed. And the biggest power in the world, which is the new American administration, it allegedly is going after it. The question therefore will arise, and it's a moral question: will Trump replace it by making American democracy great again? Democracy's messy, Mark, as you well know. It's messy, it's slow, it can be confusing and bewildering, but it's actually pure democracy works so well. or will he try and replace it with with a new deep state, fashioned in his own? No, that's the question. I'm not saying he will. I'm saying he's going to reach a fork in the road, and we'll all be shouting at him, come on, let's go this direction. There's no doubt about that. But I'm just putting it out there because he needs now to back, well, the Trump administration, because it's bigger than him now. Trump, if you look at his team, this team needs to deliver now in the first 100 days, and deliver in a big way. And it's a counter revolution. That's what's happening in open sight. Most of this is going to come as a complete surprise and confusion to those that are suffering from agnogenesis in Ireland, that are completely plugged out from all of this. They won't know what the hell is going on. They'll think it's all mad. They actually think, a lot of them, that if the 5 million Irish people know more about what's going on in the world than 80 million Americans that voted in the Trump administration, that we're smarter. We just a smarter. We're very clever. We've it all figured out, not realizing that they're they're victims of propaganda. They've no idea what's going on.
Well, this is the amazing thing. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that you, as somebody that's been on RTE in Ireland, was a trusted champion of the people for many years, according to the mainstream media, even though they turned their back on you in the last few years, is publishing something like this with such meticulous data. And if you guys are watching this, you can get this book for free as a free download. There's a page link. I'll put it on the screen, but it's basically https://bit.ly/Eddie Hobbs, capital E, capital H. And on that page, you can get the free PDF if you can't afford it, but you can also donate to buy it if you can. There's also a link there where you can get the audio book and some exclusive videos that Eddie's put together. And then when you do claim that, whether you pay for it or not, you'll get sent a link to where you can get the actual printed copy from all over the world. And if you can afford it, get one of these books and start to put them in the pubs. I mean, I was in Achill Island on Friday, and I stopped off to get some dinner, and it was in a pub, lovely pub, and we had this dinner, and we could hear the guys talking at the bar, and there was about five of the old lads there talking, and one of them was going on about asking the other lads if they had their injections, and I sat there with my ears pricked up, and they were going, no, no, well, and one guy said, I don't trust them, and the other one went, well, I feel better because I had it, which is complete nonsense. And I was there for about 20 minutes, and they were literally quoting what had just been on RTE or
Mm.
what they just read in the papers. And that's the big problem. You can't get them out of that mindset. But what I've noticed, Eddie, and I don't know if you've noticed this, anecdotally, I know that people are starting to wake up in Ireland because somebody that I know quite well here in Boyle was overheard in the cafe the other day, and I know he's completely over there and won't thinks everything else is bonkers and you're a nutter and everything else. Very pleasant chap, but a friend of mine overheard him looking at his phone, going, "Apparently these vaccines aren't so good." And I thought that was a huge moment, actually. Are you noticing anything like that? Are you noticing positive signs, is what I'm trying to
Oh
say.
yeah, well, it's very slow. I mean, it's a pendulum that's on the move. I'm just trying to speed it up
Yeah.
with the book and all the rest of it and the interviews. But yeah, I mean, because it's inevitable. I mean, the truth is outing, and you might be late getting to it. You might be at the back of the queue getting to it, but it's coming your way, including your friend in Boyle. Suddenly, oh, there's a bit of something here about it. I mean, RTE especially, which is basically Pravda in
Mm.
the Irish context, and the newspapers that have basically given up being journalists in 2020, and got handsomely paid for it. All of those people can't hold their positions much longer because the data on excess deaths, the data on disabilities, as you know, the data on harms, and all of the other issues in connection with money movements. And for example, as you refer to the revelation by Zuckerberg and what was really happening behind the scenes, he's saving his own skin with his Nuremberg defense. I was only following orders,
Mm.
and one of the richest guys in the world, and he was following orders. That'll tell you about leadership.
Hmm.
And I mean, I just don't think that they're remotely capable of continuing the illusion and much longer. So we're at that moment which we all watched when we were kids, in The Wizard of Oz,
Yeah.
when the curtain is coming back and you see the small little fat fella in the corner as the wizard, and suddenly you realize that the world and how you thought the world worked is completely different, and that you've been wrong. And I put my hand in the air and said, I was wrong for the vast bulk of 60 years. I'm 62 now. And this took it took me quite a while, not just to figure this out, but to actually psychologically accept it, which
Yeah.
is really hard. But
Yeah.
once you've done it, once you've made the breakthrough, Mark, it's great for you. It's great for your brain, because I no longer watch RTE. I find it just annoys me. So I don't
It
watch it
makes
any
me ill.
longer. Yeah,
It
just don't watch
literally
it.
makes me feel ill. And if I put the radio on, the same thing, because they're
Yeah.
using those frequencies. But I like the bit where Toto pees on the wizard's legs. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Pops his leg up and sprays him good and proper.
It,
Are you spiritually protected? Are you wearing the armor of God? Are you prepared against the principalities of darkness that currently wreak havoc in our world? Spiritual warfare is a very real thing. Weapons of Mass Protection is the explosive and practical 5-star best-selling book from authors Abby Wynne and Mark Atwood, who both agree that humanity is in the midst of the biggest spiritual awakening in human history. If you feel like things ain't what they seem, if you feel you are under attack, get your weapons ready now. Weapons of Mass Protection. Practical tools for spiritual warfare. Out now.
You mentioned leadership there in relation to Zuckerberg, and I think I had lunch with you about 3 or 4 months ago, and I asked you who in Ireland is going to rise, and I said, would you consider being Taoiseach? And you said,
Oh, well, look, you look, Taoiseach, listen, the Irish electoral system will be the last to go the way of Europe. When you look at Europe, it's already happened. It's happened in Italy, it's happened in Austria, it's happened in Holland, it's happened in Finland, it's happened in Sweden. It is now happening in Germany, and it is happening in France, where the Overton window, the gap between what the public accept as extremes has shifted back from the left to the right, to the center, not to the right of center. It's just gone back to the center when you look at it on balance. And that's amazing, because it's quite clear that all the three-letter themes are on their way out. DEI, ESG. Sorry, just explain that. The diversity thing, DEI. Companies are throwing it off. They hate the sight of the thing. They only adopted it because they were being bullied into doing it, and
or,
they thought it was good for
or
profits.
they had CEOs that were placed there
Yeah,
by the likes of Common Purpose, and I'm referring to like the French CEO and his successor
yeah.
at
There's a lot of
Jaguar,
them.
for example. And because they have infiltrated. This was a very long-term plan, and they infiltrated at the top levels in management throughout public services, throughout schools, throughout local councils, and the decentralization of town councils in Ireland, for example, was all part of this. I think when you look back on it, and the double referendum that happened in Ireland for the Lisbon Treaty, when they reversed the decision. I
It's a long
remember
time.
that. I remember saying that day when that treat the second referendum, that's it, Ireland's gone, and all that's happened since then is a massive decline in what the
Mhm.
country is and what it stands for. And
But the people could ultimately the people elect the Taoiseach through the political system. It's
I
not
know.
so like. But just to answer the question on like, so it's happening. It's happening throughout Europe, Mark, right?
Mm.
And Ireland will lead from behind. Unfortunately, it's a
Well,
colony.
have you seen Andrew Tate stating he's going to stand for Prime Minister of Great Britain?
Yeah, I've seen that, and I'm following what Musk is doing as well to the system over there, and maybe the same thing could happen over here.
Well, that's what I'm alluding to, because what
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to get to the point where who is there in Ireland with a profile, because it's got to be somebody with a profile, I think, who could rise like this. I mean, I don't think it's impossible that Andrew Tate will become Prime Minister of Great Britain, because there's nobody else there. I mean, Musk has already called out Farage, and
mm,
everybody else is just another suit.
mm.
Whereas Tate is somebody that's managed to galvanize young men, especially over the last 5 years online. And actually, however crazy it sounds, he that could well become a situation,
But
especially if Musk brings down the political establishment through the legal stuff that he's planning to do regarding to Starmer sending 100 people over to interfere in US elections. That could be massive. And now the public, because of thanks to X being mainly free speech, I'm not saying it's completely free speech, I still get censored on there myself, but the fact that the British public are starting to see the vast array of satanic paedophilia at the top echelons of the political system, at the very least, there's no other way for it to go. There's going to be a massive collapse and something else has to rise.
Well, then the answer is I'll be prepared like anybody else to do whatever's necessary. I mean, that's the bottom line answer. Of course I will. I mean, but immediately what I'll be doing is I'm going ground hurling. I'm going to hold open public meetings throughout this year, open to where I can for absolutely no cost to come in and just deal with the consequences of that. Obviously, because you'll get some nuts will turn up from the other side. The so-called anti-fa crowd with complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And just describe the contents of the book to the nearly awake. But like I actually think that while I'm planning that there's going to be an absolute gale coming across the North Atlantic from the United States, and it's going to come into the welcome arms of very serious political change in Europe. So there's going to be no pushback in Europe because of the regime changes, and that the Irish leadership, who've been knocking around for years, will be scratching their heads wondering what is going on because they'll be left isolated. And because the people didn't have a choice at the last general election, realistically speaking, when you look through it, because the nascent sort of political candidates that came in weren't organised together. They were disorganised and they were easily picked off. I mean, that's a political lesson that will be learned for the next cycle. But the next cycle may not be a normal one. It may be forced upon us because Ireland is the colony in Europe for US big pharma and big tech.
Well, I was about to say every single town in this country is beholden to US pharma companies.
And technology.
That's a very unique position, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And if the corporate message from America gets chilly or changes or gives instructions, I can tell you that because our political establishment quite clearly is excellent at leading from behind, they'll simply follow along without questioning it. I mean, as you know, I did the Killarney Declaration outside the Global Economic Summit down in sunny Killarney in May, and I was there, and absolutely like this was on the cusp of the June weekend, the bank holiday weekend, when the World Health Organization treaty was about to be voted in, which would have created the start of a global totalitarian regime in Geneva that would have had unilateral powers over human, plant, and animal health and ecosystems. That's the ball game, and it was stopped. It didn't happen. But as I was looking at it, who was there but Minister for Health Stephen Donnelly, purring with the chief executive officer of the WHO, by the way, who cannot be prosecuted under law for even for criminal activity because of the immunity that the WHO has given, and he's there purring with him in photographs. It's quite clear that Ireland is completely, I've said it before, a Vichy government in waiting for anybody who comes along with an agenda and a checkbook. I mean, that's what happened. I was there outside the Dáil. I was actually across the road in Boswell's Hotel interviewing people, including Matty McGrath and a number of others, while the vote was going down in the Dáil, which voted by 7 or 8 votes to voluntarily enter the European Migration Pact, despite the fact that we had an opt-out, which we voted for in the Lisbon Treaty. Every single independent TD, Mark, in that vote voted against it because they were getting their riding instructions from the Irish people because they're independent. And every single government party took the whip and voted Ireland into the EU Migration Pact, except one country didn't, because they were the only other country that didn't have the opt-out, that had the opt-out, which was Denmark. So the Danes were smart enough and their political system mature enough to decide, no, we're going to do this ourselves. We're going to look after ourselves. And the Irish just followed orders. They followed orders, bent the knee. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I've come also to the end of the book, as you probably know, saying, look, it's much easier a few years ago to have compassion and understanding and to be soft peddling on people's manufactured ignorance about all of this. And I started this discussion talking about that. But on a one-to-one basis, it isn't. On a one-to-one basis, it is perfectly normal now to stand up to somebody who's got the intelligence to be otherwise, and to debate with them, and to tell them that they have failed morally, they have failed intellectually, and they have failed in courage, and that the failures are theirs, and it is a personal failure that they have to face, because it is no longer deniable. The data, the evidence is all there. What's not there is the courage to look at it, and the self-awareness to understand that you've been duped and you must accept it, and you must come onto the other side. That's why when I did the Clarny Declaration, I was reaching out to all of those young journalists in mainstream media, saying, you know, join us, join the Irish people, because it's us against them. And what are you doing working for them? You should be working for us. You should be joining, and you should be revealing the truth, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you were put on the planet to do. You weren't put on the planet to implement a totalitarian regime and all of the nastiness that goes with that. And as you know, at the end of the Clarny Declaration, I said we signed this under God, and the dedication of this book is to Archangel Michael. Words that I could have never written before COVID. I couldn't put that in writing anywhere, but I feel it now. And I feel it in my bones, in the bones of me, you know.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about the spiritual aspects of this, because regular viewers of my channel know that I've been calling this a spiritual war since the beginning, and the issue with that is that the people that already know that, but then the people that are like look at you like you're nuts when you say that, because they're just still seeing things in the 3D. They're still seeing things with the same divisions. In Ireland, you've got a very particular thing with the political parties being like generational. So unlocking that is really difficult. However bad the politicians are, they still vote for the same party because their granddad did or their great granddad
Yeah.
did. And that's very particular that I've found. And it's very tribal. And it's partly because that kind of tribalism has been created and reinforced by the people that caused so much damage to Ireland over the centuries. I mean, there's a book that I often quote called Island Land of the Pharaohs that talks about there being 16 layers of black magic put on this country, specifically to break down the spiritual nature of the people, their connection to the land. And, Ireland is the heart chakra of the planet. And I think it's all connected to that. Does any of that sound like
Well, I wouldn't use.
poppycock to you, or do
No,
you?
no, no, no. Actually, no. I mean, I have a different. Maybe I have it there. Let me just show it. Oh, I do actually. Yeah. So I'll show you this in a second. So where I come from here is pre-COVID, and anyway. I didn't realize it at the time, but I now know it in hindsight that I had quite a dramatic moment when I just kind of snapped out of it. But I did it after I did it actually over in Malta, about day 5 of a week on guided meditation by Joe Dispenza. And I went over there as a complete skeptic, saying I'll be the last one in the room anyway. This is going to have an effect on. And I was hopping around after it, and I couldn't believe the lightness of, it was just amazing, right? And then I said, what is this? And I suddenly realized it was there all the time. It's just that I was ignoring it.
Hmm.
And then other things happened along the journey. So what I did anyway during lockdown was I wrote this book,
Yeah.
which is The First Heresy. It's my only time. I might never write another novel again. It's a historical novel set in the early 14th century. And I think it's a pretty good plot, whatever about the quality of the writing in it, right? The storyline is very good. But that was my way of trying to cope with this feeling. And then I went to Ephesus a couple of years ago, and I won't go into the detail of it, but again, I had an extraordinary moment there, near it, up in the hills, and at a shrine to Mary. And this is coming from somebody, by the way, who's no, I mean, I'm completely, at least I thought I was, but of course I'm not. Kind of in denial of all of this. And then I realized that there's something going on here. I'm supposed to be doing something, and now now that I'm doing it, it feels so right. And I can't use the words you use. I can't put the structure around it because it's all new to me. this feeling, but I can tell you it's real, and it's not manufactured, and it's not self-delusion. It's none of those things. I know it to be the case. I just know it. That's why somebody like me putting a dedication to a book like this to Archangel Michael is really putting it out there and saying, you tell me that this is not the case, because I feel this, and I feel it. As I said, I feel it in my bones.
Well, we can hear it in your voice, and it's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing to behold, because I think the more people that realize this, the better. This is you guys watching. This is the landing page. It's bit.ly Eddie Hobbs, capital E, capital H. I'll put the link on the screen. I'll put the link below the video. This page will explain more about the book. You can see more of these quotes from people. You can see Eddie's story on here in more detail. You can see some of Eddie's work on TV over the past 20 odd years. You can see his other books there. And you can see how the media turned against him when he started speaking out. They start using things for love him or hate him. You can't ignore him, because it really annoys them when they've got somebody that they used to Lord suddenly turns against them. We need to fix that video there. It violating. That's good, actually. This video has been removed for violating YouTube terms and service. That proves he's on the right track. And that's where you can go and get the book. And even if you can't afford it, it's free. If you can afford it, go and get the book and buy some physical copies of the book. It's in hardback and paperback, and the links will be sent to you when you go to that page and sign up.
Can I just?
And then give some away to some people. If you've got any of your friends that are half awake, in Ireland especially, just give them this as a present, because this is how we do it. We have to do it, especially intellectuals. And I'm glad you said that right at the top of the show, because the more educated somebody is, the harder they are to unlock. But the thing is, that's all on purpose, which is why I talked about publishing being one of the publishing industry being one of the gatekeepers of the MK Ultra worldwide, because they know that only a small percentage of people actually read books, but they're the ones who get interviewed on the radio and the television about stuff, and that's why they have to lock them into certain ideologies. So we're doing that in reverse, which is why it's important that you go and get this book and you share it, and you share this video as well, especially in Ireland. I mean, what Eddie's talking about is a global thing, but the Irish perspective on this needs to be shared and put out there as well, as because we're getting a lot of the American perspective, a lot of the UK perspective, and sometimes you're in a little bubble and you forget about Ireland. But it's a very, very important place spiritually, economically, and strategically within this whole New World Order plan. So
Can I just say, by the way, just for people to understand that, even though I'm Irish, and obviously I sound very Irish, needless to say, Hiberno English from the south of Ireland, by the way, for those that are familiar with Cork. By the way, if you download the audio version of the book, you'll end up with a very cultured Cork accent, just to warn you. And nothing wrong with that. If you find you're expressing yourself in a slightly different way after 11 hours of listening to the book. But what I can say is that, look, the contents of the book are aimed at an international audience. Like Matthias Desmet is in there. He's Belgian. The reviews are from two leading British medics, Claire Craig and Professor Angus Dalgleish. I've interviewed Francis Boyle, the actual founding father of the US Bioterrorism Act 1989, and about his view on COVID, and what happened to him when he called it out as a bioweapon. That's all there. Robert Kennedy's books. He's now in as the health czar in America. His books forensically covered in it, and I've also interviewed David Hughes, Professor David Hughes, a great guy. Not enough people know about this guy. Great, great, brave man as well. Brilliant mind, great analyst. He's an international kind of relations expert, a professor at the University of Lincoln. He's two books out back to back, where he's gone in underneath all of this, and he calls it an omni-war, and he goes through who's doing it, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and he's an expert, this man, on psychological operations, because he has studied it, just as Matthias Desmet has studied Arendt. These are very serious people with very serious things to say. None of them delusional, none of them dramatic, all of them highly researched, because they have to be, to step out from the shadow and actually stand up and say what they're saying. They're amazing people, and that plus many other areas of research are in there, and really it's a framework for anybody, whether they're Britain or in the United States or anywhere else, to understand why they have been duped and how they've been duped. and it gives them, as you say, a kind of a methodology to go and give it free, if necessary, absolutely free ebook download to the next person, and then they give it to the next person, because it's the only way we're going to break the power of this thing, and it's coming, but it needs to come on faster.
Well, that's the perfect way to end this interview. I wanted to keep it short enough so we can go out on X and places like that. We fully support your work here, obviously.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
You guys watching, share this everywhere you possibly can. Go and get the book. I'll make sure the link's near this video somewhere. Thanks for joining me this afternoon, Eddie. It's a great pleasure to speak to you, and well done on writing this book. And are there any dates yet for you're planning to?
No, not yet, really. I'll be formulating all of that now over the next couple of weeks, and I'll be pushing it out on social media. There'll be dates, there'll be times, and people can come along, and we can have a proper engagement. But really, what I'm trying to do is get people who are already awake,
Yeah.
to bring a few of their nearly awake people with them, because I can tell you that if they do, they're going to leave. They will leave the room entirely awake, because there is no other conclusion that you will come to.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and I think I may have a fantastic venue for you that I just secured this morning. So we'll talk about that after. But you'll be putting details of that out on your X account,
Yeah.
and eddiehobbs.com.
Yeah, eddiehobbs.com, but I'm really using TikTok and YouTube and edX, and I have database. I mean, you don't know what they're going to censor yet next, including TikToker. I mean, it's people have no idea. Like, you just saw it there. People have no idea of the continuing censorship is absolutely extraordinary.
I know.
Extraordinary.
I lost 100,000 subscribers myself, and I actually was on X the other day, and I watched the video count go down in front of my eyes. So we're not out of the woods
No.
yet in terms of censorship, which is why it's so important to share these things and get this information out. So Eddie Hobbs, great to speak to you, and I'll see you soon. Thanks everybody for watching.
Okay, Mark. Thank you.
Cheers, Eddie. Take care.